Thank you all for being here today. Just real quick, my name is Dustin Logue. I'm an account manager here at Phoenix Business Consulting. And for today's webinar, we're going to be showing you how we can help partners with their migrations from SAP ECC to SAP S4HANA using the Phoenix Smart Transfer tool. And before we get into that, just some quick rules for engagement. Your microphones are going to be muted for the entirety of this call, but down below you'll see the Q&A button for questions and answers. Feel free to put any questions you have at any point down there. We'll be keeping a look at that as the call goes on. And at the end there, we'll take some time to answer your questions. So feel free to use that as needed. But moving on, just want to go over the agenda here before we get started. Of course, we're going to go through an introduction, and then we will, of course, give a pre-assessment overview from the Smart Transfer tool before jumping right into a demonstration of how that pre-assessment tool is going to work. Now, following that demo, we'll go right into that Q&A that I had mentioned earlier before ending off with next steps and just final remarks there. But without further ado, I'm now going to hand this off to our president and CEO, Hanif Sarangi. You're still on mute, Hanif.
Thanks for that, Dustin. Could have spent the whole webinar on mute, but anyway, this is Hanif.
No worries.
Thanks for joining our webinar. If you go to the next slide, I think from the attendee list, most of you are familiar with Phoenix, and I just wanted to mention some of the people that are in our company that are going to be talking today. I think I know most of you on the call. This is Hanif. Madhu is our Director of Technical Services. I think he'll be joining in a little bit later. Jürgen Sattler is our S4HANA Migration Advisor. Jürgen, do you want to introduce yourself and a little bit about your background?
I can. So I spent a long time inside of SAP, and then they said, okay, now it's time really to do something with partners and customers, and that's why I joined the other area. In the past, I was also heading up strategic customer engagement inside of SAP, as well as custom development for cloud, and as well as the SME business unit, working together with Rainer Zino during this point in time. Thanks.
Yeah. So Jürgen and Rainer, who'll be introduced next, they joined us a little while ago, and they brought some really fascinating tools with them, which we're going to talk about in the next half an hour. Rainer, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, Rainer Zino, 35 years with SAP, everything from R2 development, R3 development, and then later together with Jürgen, many years in the mid-market business unit. Some of you may know me as the one behind By Design and Business One. And as Hanif said, this year working with Phoenix, or since the beginning of the year working with Phoenix, and specifically looking together with Hanif and David into the topic of how do we get ECC customers over to S4. That is, from my perspective, an urgent issue because ECC maintenance is running out, latest by 2030. End of maintenance for ECC. And there's no way that SAP can delay this date simply because SAP has certain contracts with other players in the industry which will not be extended. Therefore, whoever has ECC installed base customers, whoever gets approached by ECC customers saying, hey, how can I get to S4? These customers need help. Many partners are working in this area already, transitioning customers from ECC to S4. I've talked to quite a number of them, and honestly, many of them tell me we've completely underestimated the amount of effort. Why is that the case? SAP provides a certain number of tools to assess the situation, but this is not complete. For example, you need to look into how many roles did a customer create in their system over the years. And there I was very happy to see that my old friend Jürgen put together an entire suite of tools and approaches to do a proper assessment of the situation, so that when you say this is the amount of effort, these are the steps that we are taking to get you from A to B, you are on the safe side. And therefore, Hanif and I discussed that, hey, it's great that this now works for Phoenix, but let's talk to the other members of the North America Partner Advisory Council and share these news, because then you don't need to go through the entire investment that Phoenix has gone through. And by the way, everything that I just said about ECC is equally true if you have a business by design customer who wants to transition to S4HANA, most likely public cloud. Then you can use a very similar approach that Jürgen will describe. Hanif, I think these were the main topics that we had talked about.
Great. Thanks, Rainer. Let's go to the next slide. So the other people I think will be participating include Sharath, and he'll introduce himself, and you'll meet him shortly, because he'll talk a little bit about how the tool is going to operate and what the advantages are of using it for ECC to S4HANA migrations. So just next slide will just be just a quick overview. I think most of you are pretty familiar with Phoenix. We've been in the market something like 28 years. We have a lot of our own IP created for various things, in particular for things like ECC to S4HANA migrations. We have a lot of customers that we've already migrated from ECC to S4, and we've learned a lot during that process. So we're hoping that you can take advantage of some of what we've already learned. Going to the areas that we have expertise in. If you go to the next slide, Dustin, we are licensed to sell and implement ECC, S4, obviously S4HANA, private cloud, public cloud as well. We have a very senior team that implements SAP Concur, as well as SAP SuccessFactors and SAP Ariba. So if you are working on ECC to S4HANA migrations or doing S4HANA public cloud projects and you need help in those areas, a lot of the smaller partners may not have very, built out organizations for SuccessFactors or how to tie in Ariba or Concur to your ECC migration or your SuccessFactors to your ECC migration. We'd be happy to help and help you with that. A lot of going forward also, everyone is using PIPO and ECC, and they need to also upgrade to BTP, so we can help there. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk about how we can help you with your ECC to S4HANA migrations and how we can accelerate the number of customers you already have and moving them from ECC to S4, and what the benefits are for you to leverage some of the tools that we've already created that can help you migrate your customers from ECC to S4 and reduce risk and not have to do the same investments that have already been done. So we will work with our partners. So whether we're subcontracting to you or helping you deliver or helping deliver a piece of it, or even white labeling our services so that they go under different company names, we're happy to do that. And we have a huge scale, both here in the US and Canada, Europe, and India that can help. So if you need resources, lower cost resources in India or local resources in Europe, we can help you with that as well. So that's enough for the intro. Let's go right into the tools. And for that, I'm going to introduce Sharath, who will, and then Uwe later for a demo. So Sharath, why don't you take over and explain what our tools can do?
Hey, thanks, Hanif. Hello, all. This is Sharath Panuganti. I've been doing SAP technology delivery for the past 18 years, worked as a partner consultant for SAP India back in India, and later moved to US, part of Phoenix Business Consulting. Overall, in the next few minutes, me and my fellow colleagues will give you a quick walkthrough on what Phoenix Smart Transfer Tool, as we call it, or the pre-assessment tool, can help you out in terms of addressing your customer needs for their S4HANA journey. Dustin, can you share your slide? Yep. Just to iterate my colleague Rainer, who previously spoke about the challenges that we have, especially with S4 migrations. From a technical migration standpoint, these are the 5 major challenges that any implementer or a partner would go through while working with the customer for their S4HANA journey. It could go with adapting their existing system configuration, where you need to map your existing ECC configurations to the target S4HANA environment, which is one of the challenge by itself. And the impact would be is if there is any missouts that would result in a major business continuity related issues. As well as subsequently, it would be the S4HANA data model, where we see that there's a major change in terms of how the data model or the data is handled in S4HANA. Just to quote, the universal ledger, which is more like a simplified ledger, but shifting from a system like ECC presents its own challenges in terms of any custom reporting or any processes dependent on it, or even something like critical integrations or interfaces. Likewise, the customers or the ECC customers who have been like at least a decade or 2 decades would have by this time had like substantial amount of custom code that needs remediation for target S4HANA system. That's again presents as a major challenge, and the existing tools might mostly like do a high level recommendation of what needs to be done and how we are going to address that as part of our smart transfer solution. And the critical important factor, security roles, where over the course of years, there could be several of those Z roles that were created, as Rainer highlighted, which I'm sure most in all of your customers, you would be seeing at least 100 to 200 roles existing in the system. And once you get into the actual mapping to the S4HANA architecture or the theory-centric architecture, we see that most of those roles are actually redundant and could be a lot more simplified. And lastly, the large volume of ECC data that needs to be migrated to S4HANA, considering the customer being on the system for the past 10 years or 20 years, which could also be give a scope or have an impact in terms of losing that data and the overall cutover or the downtime that we would have during the final S4 migration. In all, considering these 5 challenges, we are presenting our Phoenix Smart Transfer Tool, or as we call it, a migration catalyst, on how we could really help out the customers as well as our partners in addressing some of these core problems. Next slide. Yes, Phoenix Smart Transfer, as we're calling it, it's a migration catalyst. Phoenix, we emphasize on leveraging the activate approach, activate methodology for any of the S4HANA journeys. And as part of it, we are placing our role of pre-assessment tool in the discovery phase, or you could also call it as like a pre-discover phase. So what exactly this Phoenix Smart Transfer would offer you? It kind of does a evaluation or the evaluate system at a high level in terms of generating the scope for current system. From the scope, it's going to get down to a little more a level of what solutions are implemented. As part of the solutions, what processes have been mapped. And subsequently, it would also collect the existing custom code as an inventory. And lastly, this data is going to be supplemented as part of your prepare and realize phases, where leveraging this data, you could have accelerated fit to standard workshops. And subsequently, you can perform your fit gap analysis in terms of arriving or concluding the overall extensions needed for the processes, as well as the amount of remediation that's needed for your custom code. In all, we are not just presenting this like a diagnostic tool. Rather, we are saying it's more like a strategic accelerator that would power your entire migration lifecycle, so that we are making more informed decisions, and as well as we would have more predictable go live. Next slide. So as part of smart assessment, the first thing that we would be doing, or the tool does, is collect the data from the existing system. And just to iterate, this data is going to ensure that it would be in line with the criteria of not collecting any master or transactional data, or it's not going to collect any of the personal information data from the system, but it's going to touch more of config or system data. As part of that, that's where it would first extract or collect the usage analysis. That's going to give us like a comprehensive view of the transactions or the custom code programs that you're currently using, or the background jobs that run day to day as part of your processes. Likewise, it would also collect your configuration data, something like what number ranges you are using, what configuration you have as part of your procurement process, as part of your finance process, etc., and how this data would further help us in terms of how much of it could be simplified in the next step that we are going to discuss shortly. Likewise, it's also going to collect your existing security roles data as iterated. I'm sure there could be a lot of roles created in the system in addition to the standard roles that SAP offers. So all that information is collected in terms of roles or any Z authorization objects created and the underlying values of those authorization roles. Subsequently, it would also collect your system information, such as what version of ECC you are using, or what version of EHP you are using, what's your OS, what's your DB size. All this would be more like coming up with to establish any technical dependencies, to uncover any roadblocks that we might see during our transition to S4HANA. It will also collect or more like an inventory of your existing customizations or custom developments or extensions, as we call it. And subsequently, this data would be used for classification of that in terms of what needs to be adapted, what's need to be continued, or what needs to be remediated. And lastly, it would also assess any of your existing interfaces or integrations you're using. If there are any integrations that leverages process orchestration, all that information is collected as part of this step. And lastly, what we are saying is these 6 pillars would help us in providing a more actionable view of your environment, and that helps us make more informed decisions, reduce your migration risk, and overall accelerate the time that we would want during our migration. Next slide. Once this data is collected, to ensure a smooth transition to S4HANA, what we are going to do is, based on the collected data in the previous step, there would be more of a structured system analysis. That's where we are going to first check the compatibilities. When we say compatibility, we are looking at ECC transactions or any programs that are going to that needs to coexist with the S4HANA core. We would also classify your business processes to focus on overall migration efforts where there would be a major impact. We are going to review your configuration from the tool is going to review your configuration from the aspect of, for example, on S4HANA, it's now mandatory to have material ledger set up for any of your inventory valuations, or there is a mandatory condition on how document splitting has to be set up for your FI processes. So all this existing configuration is going to be reviewed, and an analysis would be provided on the existing configuration. Subsequently, it would also analyze your existing ECC add-ons, because as we know, some of these add-ons could become incompatible with S4. Hence, this data would become supplemental in terms of making that informed decision as in what is the alternate add-on or what is the alternate solution that's needed for S4HANA. Likewise, security is another essential pillar where the tool is going to analyze your current user roles and map them to the target S4HANA roles. This ensures that we have more secure, compliant, and a leaner security architecture for S4HANA. It would also evaluate your custom code developments or customizations and subsequently classify these as retire versus remediate or versus replace. And all these customizations, the emphasis is on taking the clean core approach or align with the clean core philosophy that SAP recommends. Overall, in short, the system analysis, it's going to provide intelligence needed to build a smart, secure, and a simplified foundation for your S4HANA journey for your customers. Next slide. The pre-assessment tool has collected the data, has done its deep dive analysis, and now it's going to provide its synthesized insights. And when we say insights, in terms of solutions required, I mean, your existing customers might be using certain industry solutions, which might not be compatible with S4HANA. That's where this tool is going to make a recommendation in terms of what alternate solutions that you could be using. Going on with add-ons, for example, in the area of HR process, where recruitment or appraisal process is no longer supported as part of your S4HANA, but it might be existing in your older system. It's going to make a recommendation what is the alternate approach you need to take. Again, something like a procurement process which is now being handled through SRM in a ECC world is now needs to be replaced or remapped using Ariba as a cloud system or a cloud application for S4HANA. So again, this tool is going to make that informed decision or informed insights in terms of what replacement add-ons or what additional add-ons are needed based on top of your existing ECC system. It will also identify certain obsolete functions. For example, there could be transactions that are no more valid. For example, transactions like a customer master, vendor master. It's going to flag what is their corresponding replacement. And one of the major functionality or feature that this tool brings in is it's going to do a process mapping of your existing ECC to target S4. On top of the process mapping, it's going to drill down further in terms of what solutions needed. Under the solutions, it's going to identify scopes and the scope IDs. By standard S4HANA, it's going to give you thousands of scope items that could be mapped to the given customer. But this tool is going to accelerate that in terms of crunching or giving you a more leaner list in terms of what scope IDs become relevant for the customer. And as part of your fit gap sessions or fit to standard sessions, your focus is more now directed towards on working with the customer as well as the users in identifying those scope IDs and enabling them for S4. Lastly, the tool also analyzes your customer current user roles of the customer, and then also comes up with a list or opportunities where you could realign it with S4HANA security architecture or S4HANA role framework. As we see, S4HANA role framework or security architecture is more of a leaner model. So that's where it is making recommendations in terms of removing those redundancies and overall consolidating the overlapping roles, enhancing security and usability. These outcomes from pre-assessment tool provide a data-backed foundation for confident decision making as part of your S4HANA journey. Move on. Having covered your core processes and standard functionalities, the key area for any customer being on ECC for quite like a decade or 2 decades is the amount of customizations they would have there in the current system. So as part of this tool, it's going to firstly classify these objects in terms of retire, remediate, or replace. So basically retire is where the decision is made in terms of eliminating those objects. Remediate, classified the object as mission critical. It needs to exist with no replacement. So we are going to adjust that object. But the tool is going to propose the way to adjust that object for the newer S4HANA data model or the architecture. Lastly, replace. It's going to make you a proposal in terms of what is the new functionality, what Fiori app maybe that could be used, or a Fiori analytical report that could be used to replace your existing custom object. Also, for the data that has been collected in the previous steps, this tool is going to give you further insights in terms of how each of these customizations can be mapped to the several of the process areas that the customer uses. This gives you more, this kind of helps you to accelerate your fit to standard workshops, because half of the job in terms of classifying or the existing customizations to respective process is done. So now you're more focused on the fit gaps or the customizations, and then come up with the final backlog of action items that needs to be implemented for a successful S4 migration. Lastly, in terms of recommendations, as we all know that when we talk in S4 world, we talk about the several of the objects or the customization in terms of RICE list, correct? So for example, enhancements, the primary focus of the tool would be on proposing what's the clean core or clean core philosophy that you could adopt in terms of bringing that or replacing that enhancement with a side-by-side extension. Forms, this tool is going to make a proposal in terms of how well or what standard output management process that you could adapt as part of your S4HANA environment against an existing output management that you have in ECC. In terms of integration, it's going to propose into the replacements or how remediations for existing interfaces where you might be using an RFC that's deprecated. It's going to make a proposal in terms of what is the newer API from the S4HANA API library that could be leveraged to replace that interface or an integration in the existing environment. In addition to this, there are a couple of our upcoming features to this tool where it would also, the attempt is to enable tool to make proposals in terms of the workflows like leverage or target S4HANA responsibility framework-based flexible workflow and how it can be remapped with the against the existing ECC workflows. Also in terms of reporting, certain critical reports, part of any process, report painter reports, SQL query-based reports, how well that could be remapped again to using or replaced using with CDS views or analytical tools that are there or available as part of your S4HANA. Overall, this approach is going to give you a more cleaner and agile system landscape for in S4HANA, aligned to business priorities, easier to maintain, and ready to scale for any of your future needs. Move on. Overall, in terms of summarizing, I know that there are several tools that are available from a market standpoint as well as SAP standard tool, which is the readiness check itself. So what's that Phoenix pre-assessment tool or the smart transfer tool is offering beyond the readiness check? From system analysis standpoint, the readiness check does give you bare minimum information about your software versions or add-ons, but it's not going to help you out in terms of the existing solutions, the process and the scope IDs mapping. Whereas the smart transfer tool is going to give you more deeper insights in terms of the scope IDs that are needed for the customer in the process. As well as it's going to not just collect the existing system roles, it's going to make a recommendation on how or what is the target security role that you would be using against a given ECC role in the S4HANA world. Likewise, interface mapping, as I iterated, it's not going to just inventories the existing interfaces or customizations. It's going to make a recommendation on what newer API strategy you could take or newer API library that you could leverage, and then how well that needs to be adjusted for your smoother migration of your integrations. And the action items, right? Where from a readiness check, you might just get what needs to be fixed, but smart transfer is going to more give you a accelerated approach in terms of listing them out, create a potential backlog that needs to be addressed, and prioritize that entire backlog list on what needs to be addressed immediate, what needs to be addressed subsequently. That's something very unique to smart transfer. Moving on. Cookbooks, again, Cookbooks is one of the major, I would say, the core area of smart transfer, where it's going to generate cookbooks that offer you recommendations or guided migration steps that are needed for your existing customizations or integrations or configurations in the system. Also, the current SAP readiness check offers you a basic list or a basic import, whereas smart transfer provides a elaborate integration with Cloud ALM, which is all we know that it's the go-to tool for S4HANA journey as per SAP. So this is not just going to give you a list, rather it's going to give you more laid out project timeline or project approach in Cloud ALM, along with existing scopes or the future scope items that needs to be configured in the S4HANA system. Move on.
I think that was one of the questions. What was the difference between SAP's tools and our tools? I don't know if Uwe or Rainer, you want to elaborate on that, but hopefully we answer that question in the last couple of slides. But there are definite differences between the tools, and I don't know if Rainer or Uwe want to add any more to that or not.
In short, the additional tools complement what SAP brings to the table. And what it basically gives you is, as I said in my opening statement, gives you basically the additional 20–30% insight that you need to do to properly assess the effort that it will take to get to the next system. Jürgen, anything else from your side?
No, I think it frames very good for what we are doing. So at the end, this tool helps you really to make your project as precisely as possible and ensures really that the project delivery is predictable.
Yeah. Right. Continue on, Shara.
Yep. Thanks for that. As I iterated earlier, this tool is going to present more summarized or scoped out in terms of different application areas or process areas, and then subsequently make a proposal in terms of what items could be descoped as part of your S4 migration and what items fall into in scope as part of your S4 migration from ECC. So this is an add-on functionality or feature that Smart Transfer brings to the table. Move on. So these are a few screenshots that we would want to show you before we get into the live demo by Jürgen. So again, for example, if you see what are the different items that are needed to be migrated as part of, say, accounts payable as a process area, you are going to see a summary list over there, and subsequently you could do a drill down, identify all the custom objects or customizations in the system, which have been mapped to the accounts payable area. And subsequently, when you drill down further, it's also going to tell you what's the issue that's been identified and how that issue has to be approached. So it's not just going to tell you that there is an issue. It is also going to make a recommendation in terms of how you could address or fix that issue in your S4 migration. Move on. Again, more summary reports that you would get using the Smart Transfer tool in terms of the baddies or the extensions that you have or any modifications that you have done, and as part of those extensions or modifications, how much of would be part of your scope, how much could be descoped or retired as part of your S4 migration. Move on. Yeah, next I'll hand over to Jürgen for a live demo of the system.
Thanks a lot. Let me share my screen. Just a sec.
As you're sharing your screen, Jürgen, there's a question about, does this work for the satellite systems as well? The other sort of systems that might happen, like EWM, APO, BW, TM, etc.
We have accelerators in place there as well. Yeah, for sure. But for this demo today, we just want to concentrate on really how the pure ECC towards S4 move would look like. And as Rainer already mentioned, we are also supporting BYD, for example, BYD to S4 public moves. And this is also a special case where we already know really that it's not really just S4 public, which you need to consider then. It's also potentially the Sales Cloud, the Service Cloud, Ariba, Concur, you name it, all the other components. And we have a mapping there as well, and cookbooks available there as well, really to allow really also a safe transfer into smart transfer into this direction. Okay. I hope you can see my screen, and then I would start. All fine? You can hear me? Yeah? All good. So what I want to show you now is really the overall environment we usually use. And I think we have prepared a demo environment, a demo system, a demo project really for the S4 private cloud transition. So I will jump into it, and there are different views. One view is usually the deep project view, so you can look into under the hood, really look into the details, really how the project management system below works. The other view is the scoping view, and once you're going then to the next step after the pre-assessment and after the scoping, you would go into a discovery phase there as well, where you would have the workshop view. What I want to show you really to give you some glimpse of an idea really what is under the hood, I would give you some information about what we are talking about if you're talking about an S4 migration. So we have, for example, the overall scope items as SAP also know them really, which you can switch on and off and install or deinstall in the system. We have questions belong to the scope items. We know really how the master data setup task would be done really if you don't want to transfer the data and migrate the data coming from ECC. We know how to configure the print forms that are included there as well. We have all the migration tasks in. We have the configuration tasks, and I think we are talking about in S4 alone, S4 private alone, we are talking about 55,000 configuration tasks you need to consider really during the time you manage your move and during the time you are configuring the new environment. And we have API definitions as well as configuration classes, which are on top of the configuration tasks. The body definitions are included. And there are a couple of areas which are now where we have 0 here as a figure. And this comes really during the time we are hardening out the systems. You are grabbing the data from the customer system and bring the data in. So we know that the customer extension, the needed components, we know the modifications you did in the old system and how to get rid of this modification. We know the integration, the integration, the way the system interacts with all the other systems, with the surrounding system. So all the integration methods are really estimated as well, and really we're looking into it as well. We have things for the knowledge transfer. We're considering also product configuration. We look into the namespaces as well as the customer roles, and we have for sure also information about the Fiori apps. So we recommend then really also the Fiori apps you should use in the future based on the roles you had live really in your system. Now coming to really how what is in. So that's a view which is called scoping view, where you would see really the overall scope of a complete S4HANA system. So you have more than 1,000 stories. You can pick and choose with story points, which is an effort, and you can pick and choose. Usually, if you're doing it manually, I don't want to do this, but I just want to show what you can see here. So we can drill down into the finance area, for example, into advanced financial operations, one level deeper. You would see the different scope items there. For example, the scope item advanced credit management. Here you see the effort behind really if you want to implement this. You can get also some details what the effort really drives in this area. So it's the configuration tasks, the body definitions which you potentially have. Again, configuration tasks and all the other component, the migration tasks you need to do if you want to migrate the data over. And that's all linked to the scope item. So we know if you want to go for this scope item, we have all the details behind really what needs to be done really to set the scope item live. The scope item itself is for sure described as well. You would see then also, let's say, the signal charts coming from SAP with the process flow inside of the scope item, as well as questions we ask really during the process, really the next step of the process, where we can really drill down in detail, looking into the details, asking customers also questions really which belong exactly to the scope item. Having said this, I will go back now and I will show you a tool which we are using to match. And now you can see really that you can have different departure locations. I will use now a departure location, which is SAP ECC, a real existing ECC system. And I will choose the IMG scoping activities. What I did, we downloaded already a file. We grabbed all the information together, and I will use now a file, which we already have here, which is a sample file for the ECC action activities which have been done. And I can map it now to really how it would look like in the SAP S4HANA private edition for how the scope would look like. So I will choose now the scope. I will say take off. And I don't want to wait now for too long. So which means this overall calculation will take now a couple of minutes. So I don't want to do this now here. But I will show you immediately the result. So going back to the scoping UI, which we just saw, I have the possibility, once the program, the matching program was running through, I have the possibility to upload a selection as an outcome of the matching. I will upload it here and say, give me now the scope of the S4HANA project. And now, sorry for that, usually I need to repeat it for whatever reason. That's the demo effect today. That's the first time that something like this happens. You can upload a selection, and then you would immediately see, sorry for this, one hour before it was still working, you would immediately see really what is in scope and what is not in scope, including the number of story points. I can simulate this now manually just for a sec. Let me go back. I will choose another scope. I will go to filter. I will choose now. That's just an example with a filter. So usually it works really with the upload. Sorry for that. I don't know really. The file seems to be corrupt, which I have now here. Last time it was working. And you would immediately see what is in scope and what is not in scope. And you would immediately also see behind this the information about a kind of management summary, how much it would cost really to do this project. So in a sec, you would get the information about really what the project is all about. You would see what is in scope for this special customer, how many of the finance items, scope items are in scope, how many of the asset management scope items in scope, and so on. You would see the distribution of the scope items. You would see the information about really how many stories are in scope. You would get additional information about really how you potentially would run a discovery phase and really discovery workshops, how much effort this would be. You can calculate in hours, how much streams you need to have really to get this done. And then you will also get the information about really how much the effort would be really to get this implementation done. Going back to this, I will jump now back to the other view which we had, which allows us also, let's say, to look into a so-called workshop view. And that's the next level then, that's all in. And within the workshop view, you would see a kind of other UI, where it starts with the planning of the workshops you can go through. I don't want to click now into the details of this, but you can jump in and see really, for example, finance, go one level deeper, see again finance, the different finance areas. Again, you can drill down to the documents. You can put something which we already have in the pre-assessment where we said it's in scope or it's not in scope. You can switch it on and off really during the next phase. And you can also write some comments down. You can have information like opening up a virtual flip chart and things like this that's included into the tool. The outcome of the pre-assessment usually, now I will show you how the outcome of the pre-assessment looks like. There we have a document which is created after we grabbed all the data together from the customer. We are massaging then the data for 2 weeks, assessing the data, really reading the data, using our intelligent assistants really to do the mapping. And I think the mapping, as Hanif already said, I think we did it for, I would say, a lot of projects in the past. And we already know really if this table was, for example, used in extension and the table is not any longer there, you need to read this and this and this table, and this mapping is there. And this is then created into a so-called cookbook. And based on, and as a result of the cookbooks, we are presenting then a management summary as a pre-assessment results really as a PDF. And here would see the information about the business scope, what is in scope, the components which were installed in the old system, which needs to be installed in the new world, the modifications which have been in the old system, a recommendation really how to handle modifications, the extensions with a recommendation about really which extension should be used in the future or could be potentially also used in the future. And we are looking also into the usage. So extensions which haven't been used for a long time, we recommend really to move them immediately out. So we are not just looking into really extensions which have been used on a regular basis, on a daily basis. We're also looking into the extensions which are used quarterly, or we are looking into the extensions which are used really for year-end closing, for example. We have the namespaces in the information about the namespaces. It could be really that some partner implemented something in the past really on a separate namespace, and we need to see really how to handle this, because of very often, I think you need to handle this as a custom code, and you also need to consider really all the changes you need to do really to upgrade it and really to S4HANA as well. So which means because of our as such has really changed, and I think the objects are also partially not any longer there. In addition to this, as Sharad already said, we have the customer roles, where we're looking into the customer roles, and we have the integration points, where we look into really which kind of RFC connections, web service connections, which kind of IDOCs we have, which kind of BW connections we have really to get data loaded into BW, and so on. And for sure, we are also looking into the prerequisites for the migration, like is New.gl already live in the system? Are the business partners live in the system? And considering also the effort there. Then the next step would be in the next chapter would be that we propose in the next steps. We have the effort estimates, very detailed behind, as we said, not just saying, hey, the scope item will cost you this amount of person days to get it implemented or to get it migrated. We are also telling you it will cost you this amount of money because of you need to maintain, or you need to look into this and this and this configuration table, because of the old configuration table was also used in the ECC system, and we have a mapping between the different configuration tables. And based on this, we know then for sure how the new configuration would look like. We recommend a new configuration in the next step, and we even allow really that you can push the data into the system automatically based on the configuration you had in the past, with the conversion in between. Then we have for sure some detailed information like the pre-assessment, so which means the appendix, where the scope items are there in detail, the subcomponents and extensions are there in detail. And for sure, that's usually the document we are handing over to the customer. We have much more details already then in place for you, where you can look into the details and see in detail, for example, how the cookbook would look like really to get the extensions migrated and so on. Now I just flip through now the business scope. Again, really we saw some screenshots there. That's the information about the business scope. Also in detail, really what is in scope, what is out of scope. The components here, we would list the components which cannot be so easily migrated because of they are not any longer there. You need to consider how to handle them. For the modifications, we are looking into the modifications, which of them are already resolved or could be resolved. And we look into the modifications where we believe really it could be de-scoped because of they should not be any longer needed. Then in detail here, we have the in-scope proposal for the modification. Then the modifications are split into the different areas, into the different application areas where the modification comes from. The same for the extensions. So we are considering all the extensions. In this specific case, we looked into a customer who had about 10,000 extensions implemented in the system. And we know then really in detail per package the number of objects behind and the number of the migration effort really to get these extensions then migrated over to the new world. And we recommended really this extension should be in scope and the other extension should be not in scope for the future.
Jürgen, while keeping in mind the time, there's some questions I just thought I would send out to you right now.
I would now quit. I think I gave now an overview, so I will stop now the presentation.
Let me ask you the questions and you can just jump in and answer them. So we answered the question about, if it's only for ECC, and you said, yes, all the satellite systems, will be looked at as well, APO, BWTM, et cetera. The next question, I think we've also answered, how is it different from SAP standard tool? There's a lot of additional information in our tool about configuration, security, other things that the standard tool does not have. Will we be sending out a recording? Yes, we will. Now, here's some additional questions. How do we go about installing this assessment tool? Is it through transports? And what is the total time to do a final assessment? Do you want to address that, Jürgen?
Yeah, I can for sure. So which means, so we have a transport which needs to be installed on the customer side. So there's a program which collects all the data. And so as Sharad also said, it's not really, let's say, transactional data which we are collecting. We are collecting the data, then the customer can see the data and zip the data and send it over to us. And then it's in a central environment. And then we spend 2 weeks of analyzing the data and giving them the overall result back. If the customer is interested and the partner is interested really to work together with us, we can also have 2 sessions in between where we can ask some additional questions, for example, for the integration, where we say, hey, we have the IP addresses of the machines for the integration, but maybe it would help us to get the real names for the integration instead of just the IP address, really to make the overall assessment document looking a little bit nicer than at the end. But 2 weeks and then we're done.
Yeah, it all depends also with the partners. If you want us communicating with the customer, if you want us to do it in the background, that kind of stuff. So, we're happy to work with you any way you want us to work with you. The other question is, does this tool give ABAP code remediation similar to SAP standard ATP cockpit? Is there any more value provided in ABAP code remediation?
Yeah, for sure. It's much more. So we are also looking into really how to move into the direction of core. And we also look into the ABAP code in regards, was the ABAP code used, was the ABAP code not used, is the ABAP code similar to something which is in the standard, and really give them also the information for the so-called for the customizing, then saying, hey, it makes no sense and to have this any longer because of it's part of the standard. So it's much more the business part we are looking into, not just the technical part.
So the follow-up question is if we're using this tool, does the customer also need to use the SAP standard readiness tool and or ABAP test cockpit?
So what we are doing, so we are looking into the results of our test cockpit as well. So which means if the ABAP test cockpit was running, we are considering these results then in addition to this and bring it into the pre-assessment document as well. But again, the ABAP test cockpit gives more or less, let's say, a hint that something needs to be done. With very often an error note, with referring to an error note, and then it's a manual effort to look into the error note to understand really what exactly needs to be done. And we have the tools in place really which already do the cookbook and present in the cookbook with exactly the detail what needs to be done, instead of leaving the customer alone or the partner alone, looking into the error note and try to figure this out by themselves.
Yeah, so basically, the tool we have encompasses everything that the ABAP test cockpit does and the readiness tool does. So we're taking all that information and adding additional information to it. And the next question they have is, do you recommend installing the transports in the production server, or should we take a copy of the production server and then install the transports?
Usually, I think the customer like it more really to have a copy of the system. So I would really go for a copy of the system. And the only thing which we can ask in addition, or we would like to have, is really the newest usage data coming from the performance monitoring, that this is then really, let's say, just downloaded from the productive environment, because of it helps us to get the newest usage triggers instead of really having some old and outdated ones.
Okay. So those are really good questions. And if you have any additional questions, or I think if any of the partners are really interested in talking to us further, or they have a customer, I think we're happy to meet with you and explain more, do demos or whatever else you need. This can be great if you guys are doing an RFP response, or you want to differentiate yourself, in terms of when you meet with customers for ECC to S4HANA migrations. Feel free to include us. We're happy to do demos. We're happy to help you make a sale. And this tool, we think, will expand the number of ECC to S4HANA migrations our partners can do. And we're happy to help you in helping your customers go do the ECC to S4HANA migration. We also have some other tools that actually do data migration and other things. So feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to work with you and answer any questions you might have, or do any further follow-up presentations. Okay. I think that pretty much, I know we've been going almost an hour, so if you have any follow-ups, if there are any additional questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. You have our contact information, and use the contact information that's up there, or email me or any of our staff, and we'll get back to you right away. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Uwe. Thanks Reiner. Thanks, Jürgen. Thanks, Sharath. And thank you all for attending. Thanks, everyone.